There was once a man who absolutely captivated those around him. His name was Jesus of Nazareth. And against this backdrop of an oppressive empire that used and abused people, exploited them and occupied them and treated them like they didn't matter much, he taught unrelenting hope and how to be a part of a revolution of love. He healed. He lifted up. He crossed borders and boundaries and social taboos, all to reach out to those on the margins. You see, he had this dream, a beloved community. And he said that dream, it came directly from God. In empires, fear often overtakes dreams. And that fear, it makes people do things they never thought they would do. They compromise their own integrity, their own dreams, the very thing for which they hunger, as they choose survival instead of community. But this man spoke of living not by fear but by love, and that by doing so, their dreams could be possible again, even in a world so dominated by empire. Could it really be? Could they really build a kingdom instead of a kingdom? Could the privileged really be toppled from their thrones and the oppressed really lifted up? Just the thought of it. More and more people, they dared to believe. But then the powers that be, they caught wind of this revolution afoot. They were the 1% who didn't want to be brought low. You see, kingdom, beloved community, it threatened them because it asked them to give up their privilege, give up their greed, their hyper-security. It asked them to depend on others as much as all the rest of us do. So they plotted to have this revolutionary executed by the state. Even though he'd done no wrong other than believe that another world was possible. They mocked him. They tortured him. They told him to save himself if he was really as powerful as he claimed to be. Then they killed him. And they left his body there on the cross as a warning for all who would pass by. You better not threaten the empire. They would have left it there indefinitely, no doubt, but someone wealthy and powerful, Joseph of Arimathea, he asked for the body. And, well, we know how the privileged usually get what they want. In this case, Joseph's privilege was used for good. Had Joseph caught the dream? There's a lot of Josephs in the Bible who are dreamers. Had Joseph actually latched on to this dream of Jesus, even though it would mean leveling the playing field and losing his advantage? Joseph took the body and he laid Jesus' body in a tomb. He went and he bought linen and he wrapped the body in linen. And then he rolled this giant stone across the entrance. Those who had followed him, they were devastated as they watched them seal that tomb. It was only women there, the most marginalized of Jesus' followers. were the men? Were they scared that the empire would now come for them next? Come for them for even daring to believe in Jesus' dream? Or were they perhaps disillusioned? Their savior, their teacher, their hero, now strung up on a cross. Maybe that world, that community built on love that Jesus had talked so much about, maybe that wasn't possible after all. Maybe that was just this pie in the sky idea. Well, the curtain of the temple, it was torn in two, and with it, their hearts. For 3 days, Jesus' body laid there in the tomb. Early in the morning, on the first day of the week after the Sabbath was over, 3 of the women who had watched Jesus laid in the tomb, had watched that heavy stone rolled over its entrance. They came back to the tomb. There was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. They brought spices with them. You see, they were getting ready for a funeral, and they were going there to prepare the body. Now, they didn't know how they would roll that heavy stone from the entrance so they could access Jesus' body. But they went there anyway, in faith that somehow, some way, they could find their way to Jesus. When they arrived, they were surprised to discover that that enormous stone, it had already been rolled out of the way. You know, that stone, like the weight of death, it must have seemed like this huge, impenetrable roadblock, standing between them and the one in whom they had experienced the divine. But there it was. It had already been rolled to the side. Nothing now stood between them and the one they grieved. They would be able to touch that body again. And they would be able to feel its coldness, the life gone out of it. Maybe then they could find closure. Maybe then they could accept that the unthinkable had happened. That Jesus was gone, and with him, their hopes. They approached the tomb, perhaps with a bit of trepidation. But something even more shocking was about to meet them inside. Instead of finding the body. Inside, they found this young man in a white robe, not funeral or grieving attire, and he was sitting just inside the entrance of the tomb to the right. Well, seeing their obvious shock and fear, this one said to the women who loved Jesus so much, "Do not be alarmed." He knew why they were there. He said, "You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, right? The one who was crucified. He's been raised. He's not here. Look, here is the place where they laid him." I don't know what these women must have been thinking at this point, but I imagine they were caught somewhere between terror and amazement, hope and grief, anger and joy. The messenger told them, "Go and tell Jesus' disciples, tell Peter, that he's going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you." And perhaps at that moment, these women remembered what Jesus had talked about, how often he had spoken about the cross and what would come after it. You know, none of them had ever listened when he talked that way, the way most of us shut off when someone we love speaks of their impending death. Well, after the messenger gave them this message, the women went out and they fled from the tomb. Terror and amazement, it had seized them. And in truth, though they had been told to share what they had seen, they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid.